we want to continue today on one click down on what SAP RISE is and the services that they provide.
You might be handed this kind of project to go live on RISE in a certain amount of time, and everything is already signed and sealed. So you just have to deliver. There's the other, I guess, best practice, which I think from a typical project planning, you would sit down with the project team and your expertise, architects, and I guess decide what you actually need, and then work with SAP to negotiate those in the final deliverable and the pricing.
Some of the things I think they need to look more carefully at is what those line items actually mean, without getting into sort of analysis paralysis and not being able to move. Some of the categories are quite broad and some of the activities are quite broad. So you kind of need to interpret as you go, whether that applies, whether that's applicable to you.
Welcome to the Tekitok podcast, where we embark on a journey through the ever-evolving realm of SAP and IT operations, automation, artificial intelligence, and cloud technologies. Whether you're an IT professional, a business leader, or simply curious about emerging technologies and industry insights, our episodes will be your compass in navigating this dynamic landscape with real-world experiences. Join us as we demystify complex concepts, explore innovative trends, and engage in stimulating dialogue with industry experts to empower you with insights that matter. The views expressed by our hosts and guests are their own and do not reflect the opinions of their respective companies. The producer of this Tekitok podcast assumes no responsibility for any public content, ideas, or recommendations shared.
All right, welcome to another episode of our Tekitok. We have today Linh Nguyen, Andrew, and Pierfrancesco. We started to talk about SAP RISE in the last episode. Linh, did we get a sponsorship from SAP after last podcast? Do we get SAP?
I think we need like 1 million followers, so you guys can help with following our podcast here, and I'm sure we'll get some sponsorship coming out, especially with Tech Ed coming up soon on the schedule.
All right. So we want to continue today on one click down on what SAP RISE is and the services that they provide. We're going to leverage some SAP documentation to digest and try to go through what SAP is providing and get the expertise and knowledge from the panel to digest that for you all and hopefully provide good value of your time listening and watching this episode. So let's get started. We defined last week what SAP RISE was, the services, high level they provide. Could we leverage the document and start going on how SAP is classifying the services that are included, not included, optional, additional cost to potential companies going into SAP RISE, and start to digest all of that amount of information.
So SAP has this website that they basically their services, and I kind of interesting. The name of it is still say Hack Services. So we did talk about version 2 of Hack. This is the RISE on the hyperscaler. So if you go here, you will be able to find the documentation based on what the service you're looking for. So I think the most prevalent one is this one, RISE with SAP S/4HANA Cloud Private Edition and Tailored Option. So it covers seriously all the scenarios, right? If you have your own tailored data center, you have it in your own private data center, you have it in SAP hyperscaler cloud offering, you can use this document. So I've already downloaded this document. It's a PDF. It's a nice sizable document that talks about what services. So I think for planning purposes, if you decide to go on RISE, and assuming you already kind of pick which hyperscaler you want to land on, This document talks about the offered services with the, this is the latest version, it's July 2023. I'm sure they keep this one updated somewhat often. And in this document, I think we'll be able to explore kind of how they lay out the services and what you need to be aware. So I would just start this page and then we can all kind of go around the table. So there are responsibility column that has whether the service is standard, which means SAP would include all of that. So notice the first three, standard, optional, additional, only can be done by SAP, right? So these are all SAP related services. One they include with, the other ones are based on, I guess, your needs and what you need, and they have it optional. Optional and additional is definitely kind of like you need to decipher what the difference is. You may elect to have it. It's almost sound the same, but I'm sure there are some contractual differences. Everything else below that line, you got the blue and this amber section here is essentially, no, we don't do it. And I guess you can do it. You gotta really take care of all of it yourself. I think for the blue section, definitely not included. You can have SAP do it. You probably have to negotiate the service and the fees in a separate contract. So that's kind of the five categories that SAP breaks down to what they call the cloud application services. And then, so we'll talk about that. So I think for planning purposes, there is a definite need to, I would say, go through this in detail. Is this something that best practice planning goes for any project, right? I think you need to understand the scope of your deployment, what the responsibility is, so you can decipher what the costs or personnel needed to deploy that. I think there could be a couple of scenarios here. One is you might be handed this kind of project to go live on RISE in a certain amount of time, and everything is already signed and sealed, so you just have to deliver. There's the other, I guess, best practice, which I think from a typical project planning, you would sit down with the project team and your expertise, architects, and I guess decide what you actually need, and then work with SAP to negotiate those in the final deliverable and the pricing. And if you guys have kind of experience to share here, like I guess both ways is possible, right? That you might end up with a project like this.
Yeah, I would like to see what Pierfrancesco and Andrew have to say about the classification of the 5 type of services, and just at that level, what's going to catch your attention or caught your attention as, hey, this is how this is organized, why is it organized, and from our listeners, what could be their impact, something they need to watch for, just in the way they are classified. Anything that stands out from your view?
Yeah, maybe I'll go first. I think the standard services, I think this way is I guess a starting point for SAP to offer customers to say, hey, this is a standard list, and most customers probably think that everything they have is standard, so that seems to that they may fall under the assumption that everything gets covered. But I think this is a good start, right? It basically gives everyone a base level of what they need to do, and then they can decide if they want additional things. So I think there's like a as Lynn said, there's sort of 2 ways. Either you just go with standard and then you figure it out as you go, or you go through this line item by line item and see if you actually need it. I think the challenge, I think, will be to determine whether you need all those optional services. So I think without going into the nuances of how much it costs later to add in optional or additional services, I think that does give you some flexibility to add new things in should they come up. I think some of the things I think they need to look more carefully at is what those line items actually mean, without getting into sort of analysis paralysis and not being able to move. Some of the categories are quite broad, and some of the activities are quite broad. So you kind of need to interpret as you go whether that applies, whether that's applicable to you. So I think that's in a positive way, it's covered and it's there, so it's itemized. But in a maybe not so constructive way, it's hard to know if you need it or not. So I think nobody wants to pay for more than they need. So I guess that's why they sort of put this as a way for you to add it on later, so that you have that ability to select and say, yeah, you need it when you do. So it might also be a time to rationalize whether you need some of the things you have in an environment, and try to simplify if that's possible.
Hey, if I may ask Pierfrancesco, this document is in English. I know you're in Italy for BGP. So to me, English is my second language, but I have a problem determining optional versus additional, right? Because it's kind of legalese. It's optional and then additional. I had to look quite close. So what do you think, Pierfrancesco? What's the difference between optional and additional here? Is it
additional? I think is some services that maybe you can need regarding your process. Imagine, for example, a kind of Adobe document services or other services like this. Maybe you can ask to SAP, but it can only deliver that configured by SAP. And optional, it's possible to something that you can even don't need, and maybe you can.
Okay, so I looked through this and I found one word. I think the only difference between the two is actually these are one-off. Yeah. That means you only do it one time. This is a repeated
kind of
service
configuration, kind of setup.
Yeah, it could be, right? So like for instance, maybe, and then we'll go through the line items so we can kind of pick out some and differentiate. But I think like optional stuff is like you need something, but you need it on a regular basis. Maybe it's part of like the standard line item with a service number. You can request through the service desk, and they do it, but it's not part of the included cost, right? So that's additional stuff. And this one, additional, maybe like a one-time thing if you want to, for example, set up maybe high availability or something. It's a one-time, you set it up. And so this is the only difference I could see.
There seems to be, by the way, I think the standard services section is very small, and then the optional service is much bigger, and the additional service much bigger than the standard. So it looks like standard is going to be very few services included. But then the optional, you can include those optional service in your contract, and then that will come your service. That is the services that SAP RISE will provide. And optional, there's a point there that must be specifically contracted. So that's part of your service. It's just an optional to the standard. And then the additional, as you mentioned, is like the one-off type of things that you probably need to negotiate, and so on. So I think from a contract standpoint, the standard and optional will be part of your fee, monthly, annual fee, or whatever that is. That's what you have contracted. And then you need to reserve some budget for the additional services that you're going to require, and make sure that you have that included in your plan.
So I since I review a lot of contracts on a regular basis on day to day, I'm going to go additional. So this blue item here, right, which is the needs to be performed by customer, right? So now I have a problem saying, okay, between the blue and the additional services, what's the difference? Because actually, definitely SAP doesn't do the blue stuff, right? This is the customer. But you can ask SAP to do it. So to me, the only difference is that with blue, you could do it. With the above blue, only SAP can do it, right? But both of them will have the cost, obviously, because it's not included in the standard, right? Okay.
It seems a differentiation that additional services can only be performed by SAP. So it seems to be part of the SAP responsibilities, but they're only going to do it as an additional fee and a one-off type of thing, versus the blue section. Those are responsibilities of the customer to do, but they can delegate that to SAP to do, but doesn't fall into SAP's responsibilities. It seems additional service because the domain that they are in, the expertise or whatever, can only be performed by SAP, but they're only going to do it for an additional fee.
So, but this item for sure, if you wanted it and you already have a partner, a managed service provider, you can't have them do it, right? So maybe we can. If you guys okay, I'm gonna go down and find like a yellow item if we can. Just an example, right? We're just gonna pick. Most of these are pretty good. I think you can say, all right, SAP is gonna manage the standard services for account delivery, capacity, all this other stuff. Let's go down to. Let's find ourselves something. So additional services like network management. So you need your network team, all the hardware options. I believe it's going to be managed like the disk and the server capacity. And then this blue section here, right? So storage management, review and analyze the impact of data volume load on data environment performance. Determine if existing hardware can meet growth. Develop alternative plan, archiving, consolidation, hardware upgrades. This is definitely in blue, which means the customer is responsible for, and they could get another partner to do it. But it seems to me like if you need anything additional on the hardware side, that's not beside the standard disks or whatever practice running the database. It seems like you have to manage it, right?
This document is referred to the on-premise version of RISE. So the infrastructure is in charge of the customer.
This section then? Okay. But,
yes, I don't know if should be also another maybe that is the RISE.
No. So this one says with RISE, it said cloud, private, tailored. So all of them.
Okay.
Covers all the edition, right? So this is a document that covers if you are in a hyperscaler, or if you're running in your own, let's say AWS VPC, all right? And then if you're building your own like data center, running your own data center. But yeah, so there's an example. I think there's definitely areas where SAP will take care of the standard services like patching, operating system, OS users, taking care of the OS and everything down there. But certainly in the infra area, it seems to me you need to do your own kind of like volume, like data volume management, like monitoring how much you use capacity. And even though SAP is the one that's, I guess, provisioning and doing all that stuff, you need to figure out what you need for your growth. SAP is not going to do that. Does that make sense? Like, okay, so for planning, I think you still need some kind of capacity management as part of your team. So don't assume, I guess, you're going to get all that standard, right? Because SAP is just going to make sure things are running. But if you plan to do something and you need to track growth and whatever, you need to do all that. Interestingly enough, going down further, I think we have these excluded tasks. Like for instance, we talk about integrate with Active Directory. So if you need single sign-on and stuff like that, you need to plan for that additional item, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, I think, as an excluded task, I think sometimes you think if you're logging on and you have single sign-on and you think, well, no, I can do it myself because we've already set it up and let's say on our own on-premise situation. But here in this particular situation, definitely you need assistance from SAP to do that. So yeah, you got to read this the line quite carefully. It does say single sign-on on the right in the comment section, so you might miss that in the integrate Active Directory side. So yeah, there a lot of these areas you need to watch for to make sure that it is something that you need for sure. There's interestingly enough, there is that standard service that talked about infrastructure above, in terms of infrastructure, and I guess from that perspective, I don't think you can underestimate the need of getting your infrastructure team involved on this project, because in essence, you're incorporating another network. You're basically expanding your wide area network to include either Amazon or AWS, and all the necessary team members that need to be involved in terms of network security, and everyone that needs to be involved and participate in this particular project. It can't be done only with SAP.
Yeah.
So I think right there, management of wide area network, that is a topic that you shouldn't really underestimate while you're looking at that.
Yeah, it's certainly the foundation on the home, right? If you don't have the right foundation, I guess you're not going to build a home on top without the plumbing. So network is quite crucial. Remember, when you are in a managed environment, you are connecting to another site from your corporate site. The system's not on your data center.
Exactly.
So yes, I think these could definitely gotcha that I think you need to look out to make sure you don't have project delays.
But and the dependencies with your own team, right? The dependencies of your own availability of your own network infrastructure, because most of them may think, well, this is on Rise and we don't have any work to do, and it's not really our issue. SAP is going to do it all. Well, SAP will do their part. Your whole network infrastructure team needs to be available to do their part, to incorporate this new connectivity. So I think that's some of the areas you might want to consider in the planning to make sure the resource availability.
Yeah, just go some more examples down. I mean, database-wise, they take care of a lot of your data volume, I guess management, make sure the database is healthy. But there are additional things. Like I said, it looks like anything having to do with capacity is optional, right? So like additional nodes or anything like that. The standard HANA service is there.
I mean, they're pretty good at giving warnings. They're pretty good at giving warnings and alerts and stuff like that you would get. But yeah, you in terms of they're not going to make the decision whether you're going to delete all your table data and give you retention periods for certain data. So that's still something that you're going to need to manage as a daily business operation.
Yeah. So I see that for the planning for Rise, it's probably you have to set quite a bit of time aside to go through this kind of document, right? If you had the chance to plan properly, understand the intricacies of each of these items and see what you have to have the resources and the right timing, and I guess even the tool if it's not in the standard SAP offering, right? To plan for those. Otherwise, you would not be able to, even understand how to even do it yourself, right? If you pick a tool, you have to make sure it's compatible with SAP standard offering. Can you integrate with it, etc.? So that's part of the analysis. So and again, this document, I'm only on page. Apparently, I'm on page 10 of 65.
Wow.
Yeah, it's quite extensive. I think some of these line items are pretty general, and it's easy to skip over it and say, hey, I think there's a line in there saying VPN connections. However, I think you need to unravel that a little bit and say, okay, is that VPN compatible with the one that is going to be able to be used with Rise? So there's some things you need to do, and then unfortunately, like I said, like 60 pages to go through is quite extensive. It is definitely important to review it with your implementation team and your some sort of trusted advisor. But you don't want to get into paralysis and say I can't move because I have so many items, and some of it will be a journey that you just have to take on and work through.
So any organization trying to move to SAP Rise will have to spend quite a bit of time understanding, digesting this level of services SAP provides with their key people, technical infrastructure, SAP basis, application teams, and so on, to really understand, what is being covered, what should be included, and how's that going to impact the contract, the service contract with SAP, plan for additional budget if needed, etc. Even the organization change management that's going to happen based on some responsibilities being moved to SAP from internal to SAP or from a different service provider to SAP.
Yeah, so yes, definitely. I think the planning is crucial to take care of all of the things you want in and out and what's going to impact. And even before you start planning the actual either migration or the implementation, right? So I think we just touch on the surface at this point from RISE, the analysis phase, pretty much, right? So now you decide to do it. What you need to analyze, what you need to come out at the other end as a list of items to take care of, and do the plumbing. As I say, the plumbing in the house includes your water, your gas, your electricals, your foundation. Make sure all of that is ready before you start laying on the actual bricks, right? So I think for that perspective, we cover this episode kind of in a high level, because as you can see, we're not going to go through 65 pages of services, but it's important to make sure this is part of the planning phase. And out of this planning, then you can start including in the actual timeline, who's going to do what, etc. after you understand the scope. So I think really, when I say planning, actually, this is only the front end. This is the scope side of RISE, right? Scope. Because we all know scope creep can kill the project and kill the budget and kill many implementations. So this has been a good kind of point here to kind of talk at this level. We went from deciding why we decided to go to RISE, and now we're kind of doing the scoping exercise, if you will. Does it make sense then our next episode should talk about now that we have the scope and we agree what's in, what's out, what the actual, I guess, the implementation would look like in that sense, and who's involved typically, and that would be kind of interesting thing to understand now that I'm assured as customers have already taken.
The natural journey that once a organization understands the services, they make a decision of what they want to do, then start planning and implementation and migration and change and so on. So it looks like a good next episode of our podcast. Definitely.
Okay. All right. So we'll go into that section next, and we'll talk about the actual implementation aspect, because there's lots of things also to deep dive into, like what tasks you need to take care on a daily basis. Like transports and user management, all that sort of things, right? So, okay, thank you, folks, for this another episode that we've wrapped up here. Talk about hopefully some insights to best practices around planning for RISE and talking about the scoping of that. Thank you. Until next time, thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.